The courtroom is supposed to be a place of justice and order, but what happens when that order is shattered by violence? In this video, we'll explore some of the most shocking and tragic cases of criminals who met their end inside the very courtroom where they were supposed to face justice. From brazen assassinations to desperate suicide attempts, left a lasting impact on the victims' families, the legal system, and the public as a whole. Get ready for a gripping and emotional journey into the dark side of the justice system. The world was left in shock when news broke that Slobodan Praljak, a Bosnian Croat war criminal, had died after drinking poison during an appeal hearing in The Hague. It was a scene straight out of a thriller movie, and it left everyone wondering how such a thing could happen. Praljak, who was 72 at the time of his death, had been sentenced to 20 years in prison for the crimes he committed during the Bosnian War from 1992 to 95. He was attending the final appeals judgment to be handed down by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia when he made the shocking decision to take his own life. After hearing that his sentence had been upheld, Praljak stood up and declared that he was not a criminal. He then reached for a bottle and drank from it, announcing to the court that he had taken poison. The scene was as chaotic as security rushed to his aid, and he was eventually rushed down to the hospital, where he died. The courtroom was immediately declared a crime scene, and investigators set about trying to determine how Praljak had managed to smuggle poison into the court. It was a shocking turn of events that left everyone involved reeling. The Bosnian War was a brutal and bloody conflict that saw unimaginable atrocities committed against civilians. The fact that someone like Praljak was able to take his own life in the middle of a court proceeding only adds to the sense of tragedy and injustice that surrounds this dark chapter in human history. The courtroom was tense as the judge presiding over the trial, Carmel Agius, suddenly called for the proceedings to be suspended. It was a moment that sent shivers down everyone's spine. The judge struggled to speak but managed to ask for the curtains to be drawn and for the glass that the accused had been drinking from not to be taken away. An ambulance was called and emergency workers rushed into the building, their backpacks filled with life-saving equipment. Outside, a helicopter hovered above the scene, and as soon as an ambulance arrived, it was a chaotic scene, and nobody knew what was happening or why. Later, it was revealed that the accused, Praljak, had taken poison in the courtroom. He was immediately assisted by medical staff, but it was too late. Praljak was transported to a nearby hospital where he passed away. His lawyer, Natasha Gavo Ivanovic, was left reeling. She didn't believe that the tribunal had treated her client fairly, so she couldn't understand why he had taken his own life. He was an innocent man, she said, her voice filled with emotion. He had the right to believe that. The tribunal didn't limit itself to judging personal responsibility. They took on the politics of people, of a state, of history. It's very hard for people from this country to accept that, and actually, they can't accept it. Praljak had been jailed for his crimes against humanity. He had failed to stop soldiers from rounding up Muslims and had done nothing to prevent murders and attacks on international organizations. He had even allowed the destruction of the city's historic old bridge and mosques. It was a tragic end that had already seen so much suffering. The courtroom was silent as people struggled to come to terms with what had just happened. It was a moment that would never be forgotten. The verdict was in. Michael Marin, a former Wall Street trader, an outdoor enthusiast, and a defendant in an arson case, sat at the defendant's table in Maricopa County Superior Court, Phoenix. He had a lot riding on the verdict, but when it was read aloud on June 28, 2012, it wasn't what he had hoped for. The courtroom video shows him slumping forward, his head in his hands as if he was trying to hide his emotions from the jury. But then, something strange happened. He appeared to swallow something that had been hidden in his fingers. He even took a sip of water from his bottle, but within moments, he began convulsing, and before anyone could react, he was pronounced dead in the courtroom. It was a shocking scene, and it left everyone wondering what had just happened. How could a man who seemed to have everything going for him, someone who loved the outdoors, had a successful career in Wall Street, end this life in such a dramatic way? The autopsy report confirmed everyone's worst fears. The cause of death was suicide by cyanide. It was a tragic end to a man who had so much potential. Michael Marin wasn't even in custody during his trial, so it was easy for him to sneak something into the courtroom without anyone noticing. The discovery of the cyanide canister and note has left many of us reeling. What was Marin thinking? Why would he carry such a deadly substance around with him? And why was the note addressed to his son? These are questions that keep running through my mind, and I'm not sure I'm alone. Marin's story is one of the rags to riches and back to rags again. He had it all, a law degree from Yale University, a successful career on Wall Street, and a reputation as a skilled mountain climber. But it all came crashing down when his finances took a turn for the worse. In just a year, he went from almost having $1 million in the bank to just $50. It's hard to imagine what that must have been like for him. In his desperation, Marin did the unthinkable. He set fire to his Phoenix area mansion to try and get out of his mortgage payments. And when the bill for the mansion's balloon payment came due, he had no way of paying it off. It's understandable that he was feeling overwhelmed and out of options. But now, we have to wonder if there was more to his desperation than just financial troubles. The discovery of the cyanide suggests that he may have been planning something far more sinister. And when he told his relatives that he couldn't go back to jail, it was enough to make your heart race. The thought of someone carrying around a substance as deadly as cyanide is terrifying. What was Marin planning to do with it? And why did he address the note to his son? We can only hope that the police get to the bottom of this before anyone else gets hurt. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. A man who was accused of the most heinous crimes had just taken his own life before his trial even began. Robert Salmon Jr. was charged with setting a fire that killed a young girl he had allegedly raped, as well as her grandparents. And just like that, he leapt from a fourth-floor courthouse balcony, ending his life. The scene was chaotic as deputies led Salmon out of the courtroom after a status conference. Everyone was shocked by what happened next. Sheriff Jerry Green told the Youngstown Vindicator that Salmon seemed to be in good spirits, even talking about the future of his trial. But then, without warning, he jumped. I can't even begin to imagine what must have been going through Salmon's head in those final moments. Did he feel remorse for what he has done? Or was he simply too afraid to face the consequences of his actions? Whatever the case may be, one thing is for sure. This tragedy has left the community reeling. The families of the victims will never get the justice they deserve, and Salmon's loved ones are left to grapple with the guilt and shame of what he did. It's a sad, sad day for all involved. The fate of Salmon hung in the balance as he faced the possibility of the ultimate penalty, the death penalty. The charges against him were serious, the deaths of not just one, but 3 people. 10-year-old Corinne Gump and the elderly couple William and Judith Schmidt. The fire that consumed their home in March 2015 was fueled by gasoline, according to investigators, and Salmon had been found with burns on his body after his arrest. The trial was scheduled to begin in Portage County, 35 miles from Youngstown, where the crime had taken place. His defense team had argued that he could not get a fair trial in Youngstown due to the intense media coverage. A mistrial had already been declared in September of the previous year, when a potential juror had prematurely concluded that Salmon was guilty and discussed details of the case with fellow jurors. As the trial approached, the tension was palpable. Assistant prosecutor Don Cantalamessa told reporters that Salmon knew the evidence was stacked against him. Witnesses who had been interviewed before the trial were at a loss as to why he had not pled guilty or sought some other form of the plea bargain. So that concludes our video. What are your thoughts on it? Please share with us in the comments below. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one. Until then, peace.